next section here. So we've got Daniela and Nick Carulli, and they're going to be talking about one of the cornerstones, which is community. So welcome, Daniela and Nick.
Hi, guys.
Hi, really glad to be here with you today. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to share with you. So just as a little blip of background, my husband, Nick Carulli, is a physician, and we have a medical practice, and we have so loved engaging with patients differently and helping them dramatically make changes. And all the things that you've heard so far, Alex talking about habit and Craig talking about fueling, are foundations for building something amazing. And what we have really found is that there's still more to it than that. There's another piece to building something. If you've remodeled a house before, you might kind of have an idea of what building something includes. Maybe you've gone to Home Depot and collected some things, or maybe you asked for some advice and maybe you got some bad advice. Has that ever happened? So you might have gotten some bad advice and you went home and you tried it and it didn't work. And you go through this whole process, and you find books and resources, and ultimately, if you're fortunate, you find the right group of people to help you really get this organized and move forward. And that's what I really want to talk about today. Is when we're on a journey of ourselves, when we're trying to build our habits and we're trying to fuel our bodies, it's really tough to do it alone, right? I don't know about you, but I don't know the answers to everything. And Nick, you're a physician, and I know you know an awful lot, but do you know everything?
No, I'm not a surgeon.
You're not a surgeon.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I remember is back then, so when this picture is coming up, I hear, this was us before, and I know I look at myself before, and people used to tell me that I was thin before, but I knew that wasn't me. Is that gal in the orange shirt the gal that you married?
No.
And so I knew it wasn't me, and I wasn't entirely happy, and I struggled. But I'm going to tell you throughout the conversation today a little bit of magic that I found, and I want to share that with you so you can enjoy it as well. And Nick, when you first really decided you wanted to get patients healthy, was that something you knew how to do for them all by yourself?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you hear all this, we don't know what to do by ourselves. But when we're on a journey of health and we're essentially remodeling ourselves, wouldn't you agree? We're remodeling ourselves, and often it's from the inside out. We're creating a better version of ourselves, and one that is powerful. But the cornerstone, one of the cornerstones of doing that, is the habits that Alex talked about. Another one is the fueling. But then there's another hugely important piece, and we find this piece so vital, and that's community. That's who we hang out with. It's who we spend time with. And there's actually research on how our community affects us, and how it's something like, the top 5 people that we hang around with, we tend to be the most similar to. And so when we're trying to change or remodel ourselves, we don't necessarily want to get whole new friends, right? You don't want to say goodbye to your friends, but you do need to find a group of people to help you remodel and be a little different. And so when I started looking up, what is community anyway? And I've heard the term common unity. We've used that in this group. But I looked it up in the dictionary, and it really had 2 definitions. And one was a group of people living in the same place, having particular characteristics in common. Okay, and that's pretty general. The second one is the one that I love, and that is a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of attitudes, interests, and goals that you have in common. And the reason I like that one is because that's where the power of movement is, right? It's the power of you and me linking up together and saying, we've got this. We're going to do this, right? That's how we've stayed together for 30 years, right? We've got this. We're linked up pretty well. So I'd like to share a little bit about something kind of hard in my life, actually, that has to do with community, because I'd like you to get a clear understanding of just how powerful that can be. So when I was born, I was born in Germany, and I was born into a fabulous family, had wonderful extended family in Germany. But I was there a brief period of time. I can remember the time vaguely, because I was quite young, but I can remember being surrounded by love. You know how we tend to remember the feelings more, and that's what I remember. But we had to leave there when I was pretty young, because my dad was, my mom was German, but my dad was military, and he got assigned to Vietnam. So we moved stateside where, so that we could access him in Hawaii when he would go on leave. And so we moved to California, which was near my dad's parents, who he did not have a strong relationship with, but he had hoped that they would watch out for us. Well, long story short, we were in a little apartment. My mom got terribly ill. And as a tiny young child of 3 years old, I remember darkness. That's what I remember. And I remember the fear because my mom was sick. Oh gosh, goodness, I didn't expect that. But I remember that, and no one came, right? And finally one day, there was banging on the door, and somebody got a key and came in, and I didn't know at the time even who it was, but it was my estranged grandfather. He had never really been in the picture or anything, and he had come back into town, heard from my grandmother that we were there, and was mortified that she hadn't checked on us. So long story short, I moved from that situation to moving across the United States when my dad came back from Vietnam and went back to Germany for a little while. We spent a year being transferred, one community to another community to another community. Probably hit 30 states in a year, okay? My second grade year, for example, I really didn't live anywhere, and I really didn't go to school anywhere. We were moved so much. And the reason I share this with you is because if you can imagine trying to build something with the resources of two people. I had my mom and my dad, and they were great, and they did the very best they could, but they really had no great resources because we were being moved all the time, and neither did I. And so what we learned is we only trust each other, and we only work together because that's all we have. And that's pretty powerful, right? At least we had each other. That was awesome. But what I'd like to contrast with you a little bit is Nick's experience, because it's wildly different from mine. And I learned a lot from it. So Nick, can you share a little bit, just kind of a picture of how you grew up and what that was like?
I grew up in an Italian family. So in Portland, there was a tight-knit community, and there were a lot of Italians that lived there. And I grew up thinking that the whole city was my cousins. We'd have people come over all the time and introduced as, oh, these are cousin Joe, or this is cousin Kath, this is whoever. And so there was always people around the house. My mom and dad owned a restaurant in Portland for 50 years. And so I grew up around people. I mean, they'd take me to work with them. I'd sit in the coffee shop. I'd talk to the waitresses. I'd talk to the customers, and go in the bar and get kicked out of there because I wasn't supposed to be in. But, you know, I grew up around people, which really, I think, shaped the way that I can do what I do now. Mom and dad, mom worked a lot, dad worked a lot, but I had my brother and sister were home. My grandma lived right behind us. So if somebody didn't show up for a shift at work, my mom would have to leave and my grandma would take me, and they'd come over to the house. And if grandma wasn't there, then one of my cousins would come over. And so I had a lot of people around me to work with or deal with if I needed anything. If I needed to be taken to school, even the neighbor next door would take me to school. It was sort of like I had this big extended family around me. And I think that really helped me learn that community is so important, and being there for other people is really important too. So the restaurant really probably shaped the way that I am now, just because I'm not afraid of people. I'm not afraid to talk to people. I'm not afraid to ask for help or, help someone else, because that's just what we grew up doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the reason I wanted to share that is because if you're like me, coming into community is probably hard. And I don't know what your reasons would be. They could be far different from mine. But it took me a long time. I spent a long time watching and observing and even resisting, didn't I? Mm-hmm. I resisted community because it was unfamiliar to me. To me, it was you latched hands with a couple people and you didn't let go, because that's all I had. And but what I realized was that while there wasn't perfection in community, what there was protection in numbers. And there was a strength, and there were relationships that could support you through just about anything. There were resources that I had no idea about that could be found within other people. And they didn't even need to be experts, but just resources that I could grab onto. And so over the years, I can't even say that Nick was able to fully bring me into the sense of community. Truth of the matter is, this community that we're in right now, this health community that I engage in with regularly, kind of pulled me in, because I wanted to restore my physical health at the time. I wanted to remodel my body. But what I realized is there was a lot more remodeling that needed to be done. There was a lot of personal growth that needed to take place. There was trust that needed to happen again. And as much as I've always loved people, I could love on them, but I sort of kept this this little shield up because my upbringing was, you didn't know who you could trust. I mean, I don't think that was intentional, but that was just the process. And you can imagine moving from community to community. My parents weren't going to say, "Oh, go home with the neighbor," right? They didn't even know who they were. So what I would like to encourage you to do is to grab onto community. And if it's hard, find a safe one. And I can assure you that this one is a safe one. There aren't many neighborhoods anymore like Nick's. I think you can probably vouch for that, right? We've tried creating that and finding that for our children. And it's just hard because people move a lot more. So when you can find a community like this one that's stable, it really makes a difference. And wouldn't you say that our clients and our patients that engage with this community have a holding power with their health?
Oh, yeah.
And so that's what we've seen. So I'm just going to ask, what if we immersed ourselves in health and the people around us were doing the same thing? Wouldn't that be easier? I know it is, because I know what my growth has been. And I would love to bring on Sherry. Sherry is somebody who's been absolutely amazing in terms of utilizing our community. And I've been able to watch tremendous things with her, but I would love you to hear her voice and what she has to say about community. Hi, Sherry. How are you today?
Hey, Sherry.
I'm doing great. Thank you, Daniela.
Awesome. So thank you for being here. Sherry, up here on the screen, the beautiful lady in the blue. Tell me a little bit about her and how she was feeling at that time.
That was a really tough time. I was feeling fat and frumpy and just riddled with pain and had really bad chronic pain and just was sitting in some chronic bad place and chronic pain and a lot of unhappy days and just not doing very well at all and just feeling really frumpy.
Okay, yeah, I remember you saying that it was hard to get things done that you really wanted to get done, huh?
Yes, hard to get things done, hard to even get a sentence out. I was really breathy. I couldn't talk very well, couldn't even walk and keep up with anything, couldn't get from point A to point B without being winded.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so there's another you in black there. Tell me about her.
Yeah, she's very light now. She's down to 130 pounds, lost that 30 pounds, and just feeling much happier, much more healthy, and just really ready to go and ready to kick into spring and get in to go and get her life back and get her goals set for a nice 40th reunion this summer and getting her life back together and getting off all these pain medications and getting everything kicked back into gear and having a great life and enjoying this healthy eating.
I love it. So I heard you mention that you've eliminated an awful lot of your pain medications, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Wow.
To cut out a lot of the inflammation from getting off the Pop-Tart and coffee and breakfast that I was on and the unhealthy eating plan that I was not eating well and not sleeping at all and not drinking any water, and that was setting me up for a lifetime of inflammation. And that was really a key that the 5-in-1 brought me into eating well and getting into that fueling process.
Awesome.
Getting to
Sherry. So can you tell me, we've been talking about community. You've heard my story now that I don't think you ever knew, but
no.
But tell me a little bit, you and I were talking earlier about what this community has done for you. Can you share a little bit about that?
It's been a great community. It's really helped me with being, my husband works the graveyard shift, so I'm alone a lot. So the community really helps me engage and keeping in contact with keeping my goals cemented and keeping my, keeping me grounded and keeping my inspiration up and keeping my, me grounded and keeping my accountability and to the challenges. It keeps me inspired to get it up and get going in the day, and just gives me great ideas of keeping the time to keep my feelings on going, and gets great ideas on just everything in life. And there's just so much I could tell you about the little things that it gives you, but you get such great ideas for each little thing you could do.
I love it. So what I heard is really kind of two things that you mentioned in specific was you found some inspiration, and you found that inspiration. Where do you think that came from?
The inspiration comes from everybody else's stories and from getting the great ideas from the different talks and the different subjects, from the healthy habits and the different huddles that we listen to, and the different challenges that come up, the health habits of health challenges and the habit meltdown challenges. We get so much different insight of how everyone works, and then the camaraderie that comes around with that, and just the support that you get from other people.
Awesome. And the second thing you mentioned was goals, that you learned something about goals. Tell me a little bit about the value of that in your life.
Oh, it's helped me so much to set goals and to write them down and to be able to look back and say, wow, I really did get that win in there, and to learn about how to set goals and to learn to strive to make it not just a goal on a scale, but to seek out new goals for new perspective on life and new something to set for and something to strive for and get new ideas for just new things to get out and
Awesome.
go and do.
That's great. And you know, one thing that I don't think you mentioned here today, or maybe I didn't catch it, but man, it struck a chord with me. When we were talking before, you said something to the effect of it's real. Do you remember when you said that? Tell me
Yeah,
what
I
that
did.
means to you.
I said that it's real because it just really comes down to the people are really share their stories from their hearts, and they really come and they really try to help you, and they really care about everybody, and that it's not just fake and phony stuff. They really care about each other, and they really care about your feelings, and even on the challenges on the wall, they really care about how each other's doing, and they really come together and share our feelings and our
I love that, Sherry.
and it's just it's really nice to have that camaraderie and that help. It's not just your coach that's there for you for every time you need something and have a question. You have that extra camaraderie that comes into play every time you play on a challenge.
I love that, Sherry. Oh my goodness, because what you're talking about is something the world doesn't see so much anymore, and that's real relationships and big talk rather than little fake relationships and small talk, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Sherry. I love your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wow, thank you, Nick and Daniela and Sherry, just for sharing all about community. And community seems like it's a wonderful thing when you have it, and it's a terrible thing when you don't. And so